You start with your opening remarks, please.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, very well, thank you.
Perfect, thank you. So good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is André Loranger. I'm the Assistant Chief Statistician at Statistics Canada, responsible for economic statistics, and also one of the co-chairs of the UN Network of Economic Statisticians. Thank you for joining us for this webinar focused on beyond GDP issues, particularly the measurement of well-being, inclusion, and sustainability. This webinar is part of a series of regional consultations conducted by the Network of Economic Statisticians to gather information on statistical program priorities, initiatives to improve economic, socio-demographic, and environment statistics, indicators, and accounts for multidimensional measurement of sustainable development. My network colleagues and I are extremely pleased to have this opportunity to discuss with you your priorities, ideas, and ongoing projects, as the Arab and African regions that you represent are populous, vibrant, and economically important part of the world. Your statistical needs may also have very different facets when compared to other regions in the world, especially with regard to social and demographic aspects. And we need to ensure your perspectives are taken into account as the statistical system evolves. The UN Network of Economic Statisticians was established by the 52nd session of the United Nations Statistical Commission in March 2021. And we've launched consultations on the Beyond 2020, the Beyond GDP agenda as part of its mandate to facilitate horizontal coordination for statistical programs in measuring multidimensional relationships between the economy, the environment, and society, of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and also our Common Agenda report. The webinars with regional representatives are one aspect of these consultations. We aim to complete various regional consultations before the end of the year. In addition to the regional consultations, we have conducted a 6-part Beyond GDP sprint, which will be discussed today, and which also represented a venue for discussing the Beyond GDP measurement challenge, as well as gather ideas for moving forward. We will consolidate the information gathered through the sprint and through the regional consultation in a prospectus, which will be part of our formal report to the UN Statistical Commission this spring. As I mentioned today, the network will present its findings to date, and we will also be hearing from you as to what you identify as important to measure in the context of the Beyond GDP objectives, and maybe what you're required to achieve this. You may have noticed that each session on the agenda includes some time for Q&A, as well as polling questions, which are aimed at encouraging participation and engagement on your part. We want to hear your opinions, your challenges, and also please share your successes. This is a forum not just about informing, but a forum for dialogue and mutual learning. So I look forward to hearing your comments. Without further ado, I will now invite Mrs. Wafa Abdul Hussein, Chief Economic Statistics at UNESCO, to also provide some opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Like Andre started, I am Wafa Abdul Hussein, Chief of Economic Statistics at the Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, ESCWA. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this joint regional webinar. ESCWA and our member countries have been engaged in the global and regional consultations on the overall process of the 2025 update of the system of national accounts, whether in research issues, contributing to drafting guidance notes, providing feedback on the guidance notes, and volunteering for testing and experimentation. At ESCWA, we are engaged in enhancing networking and communication and outreach with organizations, countries, experts, academia. Both the Arab and African regions have common opportunities and challenges in this regards. I want to thank the co-chairs of the network, André Loranger from StatCan and Richard Hayes from UK ONS, and our partners in the UN Statistics Division, ANDESA, and colleagues from ECA for this collaboration, and Mr. Ivo Havenga working behind the scenes. Also, our colleagues in ESCWA who contributed to the Beyond GDP work and the SNA update. I apologize that we don't have Arabic translation, but we are ready to translate your questions. As Andre said, we have plenty of time to get your feedback, your clarification that you need, ideas that you have. Whether you want to ask in English, Arabic, and French, we are available to provide this translation and answer back to you. The presentations are all on the website, and you can download them for your convenience. And I also, with no further ado, I will give the floor to Oliver, Chief Statistician at ECA. So Oliver, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Wafa. First of all, good morning, good afternoon, colleagues that are connected to this call. Let me start, first of all, by really appreciating the collaboration that we have with ESCO and, of course, UNSD in this work that we are working on beyond GDP. GDP has been known to be a good measure of economic growth and performance of a country. But we know from the recent crisis that as ongoing, the Russian-Ukraine, that have exposed the vulnerability of economies, for instance, in international food prices. Such situations are blind spots in the measurement that are never adequately covered by the GDP measurement. It clearly reveals that the indicators we use are incomplete and that we need to come up with innovative ways of tracking what is important for monitoring our economies and anticipate or be more resilient to crisis. It is also evident that there is an overemphasis on GDP alone as a measure for the performance of economies. Focusing on GDP alone leaves out many areas that require our attention. Many African countries went through episodes of rapid growth without poverty reduction, and some with huge natural resources potential are still struggling with data and having very erratic GDP growth rates. Countries in the Congo Basin, for instance, are receiving almost no economic compensation while providing vital economic ecosystem services that contribute to wealth creation and therefore GDP growth for the world. Growth through non-sustainable tourism is also tempting, but is also an existential threat from small island development states. Many oil-producing countries are caught in the middle-income trap and have never managed to successfully diversify their economies and reduce poverty and inequalities. Digital technologies have also become increasingly prevalent around the world, but their impacts are not well captured in our current economic statistics. As statisticians, we need to begin to question our indicators before society begins to ask us many questions. As the UN Secretary General said more recently that, and I want to quote, "Now is the time to correct a glaring blind spot in how we measure economic prosperity and progress. When profits come at the expense of people and our planet, we are left with an incomplete picture of the true cost of economic growth," end of quote. It's very clear, colleagues, that GDP has been mistakenly regarded as an indicator for overall societal progress and development, even though it cannot measure inclusion, justice, and sustainability. GDP does capture the how of producing and distributing goods and services across societies. But to measure human progress and well-being, we must go beyond gross domestic product and place a true value on the human and natural capital. The well-being of the current and future generation must be the primary objective of the development. Growth must be associated with rising inequalities or environmental degradation. Rather, the world needs to move towards an economy that uses natural resources sustainably and implements the social contract of solidarity and equality in sharing the benefits of growth. I think it's time, and I think time has come, colleagues, that for complementary indicators of GDP must be given more weight in monitoring dashboards that we use to drive our societies. It is good that the value and necessity of extending decisions making beyond GDP have become recognized by many governments, and a wide range of indicators, data, and statistics already measure elements of progress beyond GDP. This will therefore require that we agree on a set of comparable indicators to measure the real value of economies. I believe that this webinar dialogue that we're having today on beyond GDP is important and comes really handy and timely. It is therefore my hope that we will be able to create some kind of momentum that would result in development of better indicators for designing, implementing, monitoring, and also evaluating our sustainable development agendas. So as I conclude, I'd like to believe that this meeting will be rich enough and provide really very correct contributions and will help us to go beyond where we are now by moving one more step in our quest to identify indicators that will help us complement the GDP and internationally comparable, and as well as produce within the resources that we have. I thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Oliver. Thank you. And we'll see more from the African perspective with the presentation that Greg will be presenting. Thank you. We will have thank you, Oliver. So Vincent, Sim from UNSD, will have just a word on behalf of UNSD.
Yes, thank you, Wolfram. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Beyond GDP webinar on priorities in measuring well-being, inclusion, and sustainability in African and Arab countries. I'm Vincent Sim, and I'm from the UNSD. I'm making these remarks on behalf of Stefan Swinespes, the director of UNSD. We would like to thank everyone for taking the time to attend these very important events. This event is jointly organized by ECA, ESCWA, and the United Nations Network of Economic Statisticians. The establishment of the network is one of the recommendations of the Friends of the Chair Group on Economic Statistics to improve the overall effectiveness and efficiency of the system of economic statistics, which were presented to and approved by the Statistical Commission at its 52nd session. The network will implement the endorsed recommendations of the Friends of the Chair Group for an agile and more responsive system of economic statistics based on 4 thematic work streams: networking, collaboration and consultation, transforming and challenging the system, statistical infrastructure and operations and data solutions, enabling institutional arrangements and governance, and experimenting, integrating, and documenting statistical frameworks and methods. The network has adopted sprints as its preferred working method to increase its ability to act agilely to expedite the formulation of statistical responses to fast evolving and emerging social, economic, and environmental circumstances in a short time frame. So far, we have organized 4 sprints comprising a total of 17 virtual sessions. And these are the organizational sprints, the access to data, private data sprints, the Beyond GDP sprints, and the recently concluded measurement of inflation of owner-occupied housing in the CPI sprints to tackle various emerging issues in the economic and related environmental and social statistics landscapes. And to implement the recommendations of the network, we have also Friends of the Chair Group. The network is also collaborating with the regional commissions to organize regional consultations to learn from regional statistical and policy representatives, their priorities, and to explore regional and global partnerships between the network and these organizations. In response to demand from colleagues in the ECA and ESCWA regions, we are organizing this event to share the findings of the network's Beyond GDP sprint, as Andre has mentioned just now. And in this sprint, we'd like to hear your views on the key proposal of the this Beyond GDP sprint to develop an integrated statistical system for inclusive and sustainable well-being by drawing upon existing statistical standards such as the SNA and SIA. We would like to point out that the network and ESCAP recently organized a similar webinar for the ESCAP region on the 21st of November, and we received a positive response, comments on this initiative during the webinar. To conclude, we'd like to thank the ECA, ESCWA, and the Bureau of the Network for the excellent collaboration shown in preparing the agenda and making the necessary arrangements for the webinar. We look forward to you actively sharing your insights and views during the webinar, and we wish everyone a successful meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vincent. And we can directly go to the session 2, which is on statistical priorities for the UN ECA and UN ESQA. And our colleague, Chief of Economic Statistics at ECA, Greg, will make a presentation, and we hope that African countries' representatives attending with us will have a feedback and comments on their part on the priorities that are of interest. So Greg, you can start your presentation, please. Greg, Chris has made you panelist, but you need to, we're not seeing that you're connected. Okay, so I think I will try to connect you again here. Okay. Okay, we'll try one more minute.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
thank you.
We can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Do I need to show on the screen, or you can help to show on the screen?
We can help you. We have your presentation. Chris will share it. And you just tell us when to go forward.
Okay. Because earlier I couldn't find somewhere to upload. I think now it's in a different windows. Thank you.
إذا بالعربي أنا ممكن أن نقول البرزنتيشن اللي رح يقدمها جريج رئيس قسم الإحصاءات الاقتصادية باللجنة الإحصائية لأفريقيا، هي عن الأولويات الإحصائية في قياس الرفاه والشمول والاستدامة في البلدان الأفريقية. هو رح يكون يعني باختصار شديد لأنه هن بانتظار التعليقات والآراء اللي رح تكون من قبل المشاركين.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to the first slide, please. Yeah, our same topic today is beyond GDP. We know that GDP as a measurement of the value added of the newly produced product of the year of the nation has not been able to capture the depleting stock of natural capital, so it cannot properly measure the sustainable development. The next slide, please. Here shows an example and cases to show that the in deficiency of GDP as a measurement. Many countries in Africa with huge capital resources, natural capital resources, but still struggle with the debt and has a erratical GDP growth. The sustainable growth development has not been properly captured yet, with environmental degradations. Example, growth through non-sustainable tourism, an essential threat from small island developed states. Many oil-producing African countries caught in the middle income trap and have never managed to successfully diversify their economic and reduce poverty and inequalities. Next slide, please. Wealth account based on the methodology of SNA will provide an alternative measure of economic progress, which including non-sustainability. So the approach taken by measure assets and take a capital account approach for the economy planning and management is similar like management assets profile. Here the assets profile including various different kind of capital, including produced capital, natural capital, human capital, and social capital. Next slide, please. So beyond GDP, we take a capital approach to get total wealth. It's built on the notion that the current wealth must constrain future consumption. Here, the produced capital, including machinery, structure, equipment. Natural capital include agriculture, land, protected areas, forestries, mineral and energy resources. Human capital, because as we know, measured by health, education as the proxy. Social and institutional capital, including measurements such as rule of law and governance that contribute to the efficient economy. Next slide, please. In African countries have been participating in a compilation of a CR central framework and CR ecosystem accounting. There are about 17 countries have compiled various types of accounts. As you can see on the table, from water accounts, agriculture, forestry, fishery accounts, energy, mineral accounts, all the way to different type of accounts. Okay, next slide, please. So if we take this capital account approach, we can identify the major areas from economic capital, human capital, natural capital, and social capital. The list of items here shows what is supposed to do, and then what the current some of them currently are going on. For example, economic capital need to strengthen the compilation of balance sheets, introduced time use survey, improved the trade statistics, adopting trading value added, and at the sub-national level, combining GDP, setting an account for tourism. Those are things currently we are doing. Human capital occurs, including, for example, health and education. As we know, in the new national account, in the new system of national account, there are satellite accounts on those areas. For natural capital, CR central framework and CR ecosystem accounting, as showed earlier, some countries already been working on this area. Social capital area is pretty weak because international organizations are working on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Greg. You know, we would like to see if countries participating can give us some feedback on the priorities you mentioned, the challenges and the frameworks available, what they are implementing and what are the needs for them to go ahead. So we will follow, we will see if there are questions for Greg on African situation. Anything that, like I said, you can write your question in the chat in any language you would like to. You can raise your hand if you want to speak and ask directly. And also, if you want in the later sessions, once you follow few presentations, you would like to come back, we are also open to get your feedback on you know, on the presentations. So for now, I think, is there anything? There's nothing on the chat for the presentation that Greg presented. I want to see if any of our presenters have any comment, or we can go ahead with the ESCWA presentation. Anything from our co-chairs that you would like to add to what Greg presented? Yes, Richard.
I just wanted to say I thought that was a very strong presentation and agrees with many of the presentations that I personally have been giving recently. In the UK, we're currently undergoing a review of our domestic wellbeing framework, and many of these questions are exactly the questions that we are considering as well. I think it applies globally, the points which Greg is raising, and very supportive of his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's good to know that it's not only in, you know, African or Arab countries, but many countries are reviewing and or reorganizing their programs to be able to implement such big projects for statistical offices and their network. I would like just to remind you that we have audience that are not statisticians, so abbreviations and all that, try to spell out, you know, all what we have on CSNA, all the abbreviations we have. If there are any other questions on the presentation of Greg, any comment? Okay, so I think I can start with the ESCWA perspective, and there are, like I said, many things that are in common, like resource rich, what are the priorities, and we will see that we have the similar, you know, projects and applications with countries using statistical frameworks to implement some of those elements of sustainability and well-being. I will try to share my presentation. It's just taking a little bit of time.
Where is the Zoom?
We will share it from the main computer that is on the Zoom link. From my side, I'll go back a little bit on the background on why it's important. What are the background or the issues behind the limits of growth, the many things that are that have been on the table 50 years ago, and it was at the academic level or just at a research, did not go further to be part of official statistics and production at the production cycle of statistical offices. I would like to start with mentioning that this year it will be 50 years. You can go back again. Okay, so this year marks 50th anniversary of the Club of Rome, which talked about the limits of growth. And since then, it talks about that the measure and report of the state of welfare, equity, justice, or efficiency is more important than just talking about the highest per capita GDP or measures of GDP. And this year, they are organizing weekly seminars and presentations on issues related to limits of growth. And parallel to the limits of growth, there were theories on steady state and development of indices on sustainable economic welfare. I would like to mention Herman Daly, who passed away just last month, and who created the Association of Ecological Economists. And they contributed a lot to this work from the academic and operational level. Many issues are still on the table. We hear like degrowth, a lot on philanthropy are talking about human flourishing or, wellness, happiness. Many things are on the table on what is important to measure and what are the methodology to measure that. I just saw that, for example, the human flourishing, which is, yes, I think yesterday and today, it's organized by Templeton Foundation. They have a session on measurements, statistical measurements on human flourishing. And just recently, last month, we had a very big, not promotion, but a communication on GDP and beyond GDP. And it was in an issue in Nature in November. And it said, how can we save the planet? Can an economics formula save the planet? What is about GDP? And how can we make it better to mean more for health, economies, and the planet? And then the author mentioned that the UN wants to downgrade GDP and instead gauge economic growth with metrics that include impacts on people, ecosystems, and the climate. In the same issue, it happened that there was an article on the Middle East, and the Middle East going green, and the opportunities that countries are making their own a national like the vision or the national plan to improve their performance and going green. And this is an article available also and written by Elizabeth Gibney. So I think there are a lot of opportunities for the Arab region, given that the SNA is the system of national accounts is being updated now, and most of the countries are engaged in this update, and with the UN network that is bringing on research, lessons learned, and then research issues to go ahead. That we can engage and have more work on this. First of all, I think it's important, one of the opportunities is responding to policy priority in the Arab region for integrating economic, social, and environmental information into extended accounts and meaningful and actionable dashboards of indicators and indices to measure well-being, inclusion, and sustainable development, for which the statistical systems in Arab countries should be ready to implement. So first of all, it's a policy demand. Second, the central role of the statistical offices. They are well placed for extending the statistical frameworks and invest in measuring well-being, inclusion, and sustainability measures in addition to GDP. The third opportunity is engaging in regional consultations and communication. So we at ESCO, we've been collaborating with partners on organizing regular webinars on SNA update and the global network of statisticians. We reached out to economists, social scientists within the organization, and a wide network from the countries' organizations to communicate with them and keep them updated on the work that is being done. Another opportunity or other side of opportunities is that the Arab region and the G7 and the T20 work that Saudi Arabia was part of last 2 years in 2020. There was a recommendation in the think tank, the summit in Saudi Arabia. There was a policy brief that called the Group of 20 to move beyond GDP by complementing it with inclusive wealth indicators by 2025 to unlock the financing needed for the SDGs and achieve the 2030 agenda. The website available for this Think 20 has many policy papers, and they addressed many of the issues that we are discussing now, and they are part of the Beyond GDP. Second thing is that moving beyond GDP requires complementary indicators that match GDP's conciseness, robustness, and relevance, while providing an improved foundation for decision-making that will enhance long-term being. And this is also one of the policy papers that was provided in the Think 20. Another opportunity, we saw that 2 climate summits, one was organized last month in Egypt, and the next one will be organized in UAE. And this is really huge for the Arab region. It brings more engagement and commitment from Arab countries to really look at taking more accounts from natural resource use and climate change and disaster management. And then also from the well-being side, to work more on providing and tracking well-being of their people. So these are opportunities that are available in the Arab region. Now, the high relevance and specificities. Now, we saw that Greg presented some of the specificities in the African region. I would like to add that in terms of well-being, it's of high importance to work on distribution of household income because we have problems of, unequal distribution of wealth, equity that we need to work more on providing fair and equitable income and benefits to the households. Unpaid work, there's a lot of unpaid work, especially by women, giving care to and families and social safety networks. Labor, education, and human and social capital are also of main importance, especially on quality of work, quality of education, and health and social conditions. We have problems on peace and security that is not in other regions that we have to also address. Good governance and trust. A lot of work has been done in ESCWA on like policy issues and recommendations on tracking and improving trust and good governance. From sustainability point of view, we have problems like in Africa, natural resource exploitation, and we have to add that the benefits from these natural resources go mainly to multinational enterprises, so the benefits go outside the national economy. We have problems with future generations and demographic change, with migration, brain drain of young skilled people and refugees. And we have to address that from national transfer accounts. From decoupling of growth and environment in Arab countries, we can look at, we're not at this level yet. The theory says that Kuznets curve, they say that the empirical relationship between growth and environment and natural resources, at a certain point on the long run, there will be an inverse U-shape relationship. However, in Arab countries, we still see that the GDP growth rate per capita follows same trend of CO2 growth rate per capita. We had many indicators that also follow the same thing on water consumption, energy use. So we're not yet at the level of decoupling. There's no evidence. And the literature showed that, like a paper in 2012, that in the Middle East and North Africa, there's no evidence for this hypothesis in the region. Another more recent paper showed that population growth is the primary driver of CO2 emissions in the Middle East, with a contribution rate of 54%, followed by energy intensity and economic growth. I want to go back to well-being and sustainability. I'll talk before on the sustainability and environment and natural resources. The system of environmental economic accounting, SIA, has been in place in few Arab countries. We worked on supply and use tables, on main submodules on water and energy. This was a priority in the Arab region. We started this work since 2004 and through several development account projects and XB projects. There are other projects on natural capital accounts and wealth accounting led by the World Bank, but none up to my knowledge have been implemented in Arab countries. Most of the support went to Africa. And the results on natural capital accounts are in many countries where they produce these accounts and they use them for policy. Another framework that also we worked with some countries is the Ecological Footprint and Biocapacity framework. It's an accounting framework produced by the University of Guelph and the Global Footprint Network. The importance of these accounting and classification rules, they provide link to the national accounts and the input-output tables, which are very useful for analysis, modeling, and estimation of footprints. So the same conceptual framework is used for materials, water, energy emissions, land ecosystems, waste, and the things that you are interested in. I'm just sharing that these are the different modules of the system of economic, environmental economic accounting. And the manuals are there, the implementation guides are there, the ecosystem accounting, has been approved by the United Nations Statistical Commission last year. We didn't start the work with Arab countries, but it's something in the pipeline. We will work with the United Nations Statistics Division to implement the ecosystem accounting. This is a list of the countries who implemented or who are in the pipeline of planning to implement the accounts. So the United Nations Statistics Division makes an annual survey on what type of accounts are being developed, are they funded by projects, what are the plans, and we see just a few countries are working on these, and yes, water and energy is priority, but none has regular production. Compared, for example, I put Turkey here, which has regular funding for producing the accounts, and they produce it on a regular basis. I would like to ask countries if we have participants from the National Statistical Offices. A new survey went from UNSD to ask about the current update of the implementation of the environmental economic accounting, and we hope to get replies from your side to update and to have a general overview how things, the status and progress on the implementation. What we were able to do through these projects is a lot of online training material, and we have hundreds of participants who joined these e-learning online training materials. Many of these we were able to translate into Arabic, and they are available. We collaborated with the United Nations Statistics Division and the Training Center of ESCAP, CIAP, and I give links to those trainings. We hope at any time, delegates or statistical offices and the ministries concerned with these can do those trainings, and we are available for any clarification or explanation during these trainings. Like I said, the wealth accounting, it's mostly in African countries, and it's implemented by the World Bank. We hope that we have more collaboration with the World Bank to implement such projects in Arab countries. This is just a view of the global footprint network and the results of the ecological footprint in Arab countries. We have on top the biocapacity of countries and down the ecological footprint in countries. And it's basically opposite relationship. The countries who have biocapacity, or we have Sudan, Morocco, Algeria, who have many natural resources and not a lot of CO2 emissions, and whereas the others, on the other hand, the ecological footprint is very high in GCC countries compared to the other countries. And these are data that are available at the national level. And then countries can look and work with the footprint network to really look at the data and see how it applies in their own national context. Yes. Now, the other side on research on sustainability and well-being beyond GDP, at the statistics division in ESCWA, we have colleagues who worked on the national transfer accounts for some time. It was a project, a DA project led by UNDP, and it was implemented in Jordan and Palestine. No projects were funded to continue the work, and we need to look really how the NTA network can engage more Arab countries, because it's a very important framework that need to be addressed regarding like well-being and sustainability. Going back to the ESCWA work, other clusters and teams have done a lot of research on measuring progress beyond GDP, and they presented this work along the CEB work and on the Beyond GDP Index and a framework. Our colleagues Khalid Bousmail and his team presented this work, And they are also willing to share if any of the countries are interested and want to implement this framework. Other indices also from the same team are New Development Challenges Index that measure the shortfalls in 3 development achievements, well-being freedoms, measured by the 3 quality-adjusted dimensions of the traditional Human Development Index, environmental sustainability, and good governance. And I give a reference to the paper that was published on this. Other related sustainability indices that are not produced by countries, but are produced by the Sustainable Development Network. We have the Arab Region SDG Index and Dashboard Report, produced jointly with the Mohammed bin Rashid School of Government and the SDSN network. So it has an index for the SDGs, but like we said, it's the countries don't produce such index, but the index ranks the countries according to certain methodology. Many countries also work occasionally on extended accounts, labor, education, health, but the problem it's not a continuous and linked in an overall system that can guide policy and give long-term guidance on the well-being and sustainability. The future steps we're looking for is getting feedback from the consultation and follow-up from organizations. Further coordination is needed, like I said, within our own organization with social statisticians, with social affairs officers who are working on these issues, getting outreach and networking, engaged in research and experimentation. Piloting and experimenting is not a big commitment, but it's something that countries can benefit from, getting assistance and sharing the results they get on the experimentation. Once these are identified, organizations can work together to bring capacity building and more coordination among themselves. And then knowledge sharing and lessons learned, South-South and North-South. So with this, I end my presentation regarding ESQA countries. We will have in the last session a polling question on what priorities countries look at. So we can give like maybe 5 or 10 minutes for questions on this, and then we will move to the sessions, the third and fourth session. So if there are questions in the chat, or if you want to ask the question directly, please raise your hand. And I repeat, for the questions you can ask in Arabic, English, or French, and we will manage to translate and give you the answers. So maybe we can ask questions to countries who implemented any of these extended accounts on labor, education, health conditions, and then maybe sharing their experience. We give you some time to share your experience and give your comments. And Andre, please, if you have a comment or guidance on this, please go ahead.
Thank you. The buttons are quite sluggish. You push them and nothing happens for a while. So that's why it takes so long to get on screen. Yeah, I have a few comments on both presentations, which I thought were excellent. One of the things I think that stood out for me in both presentations is the importance of the wealth accounts. As we talk about sort of the system of national accounts and obviously the beyond GDP discussion, I think one of the key elements there is putting more emphasis and development on the wealth accounts, and as a measure of future sustainability. I think it's really, really important. To do that, I think we need to sort of focus on improving measures of capital. I think we have a lot of work collectively to do on the measurement of human capital and the measurement of social capital. One thing to me that's always obvious is that this is not about eliminating GDP, but rather complementing it. And I think that came out in your presentation, Wafa. GDP is a measure of production, and obviously we need to do more than measure production. And as we sort of think about well-being, this is where I think the network can play a big role. But we have a multiplicity of frameworks that touch on well-being, SDGs being one of them. But I think one of the things for me that always resonates is that I think the SNA is kind of a foundational element in all these frameworks. No matter what framework we decide to use in terms of measuring well-being, at the heart of it are a few key indicators that come from the national accounts. You mentioned sort of future development again in terms of distributions and producing distributions of household income and so on. Again, I think we need to sort of further our work on the human and social capital side of things. But one thing I think that's clear is that as we try to address questions of diversity, inclusion, sustainability, and so on, we as statistical organizations are going to need to develop more granular sources of data. And to me, this is sort of where I think the future of statistics is really going. The demand is always going to be for more information for policymakers, and to be able to deliver on those things, we actually need to think about building those data sets at a very granular level. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much. They were both excellent presentations.
Thank you, Andre. So again, we give some time for any question from the participants, or any suggestion, like how would you like to contribute to this debate? Whether from research and academic point of view or from official statistics and government position, it's important to get your feedback on this. If nothing yet, if nothing on the...
Wafa, if I may.
Yes, Oliver, please.
Yes, it's Oliver. If I may, Wafa, first of all, thank you very much for the presentation so far. I think it's very clear that our countries' economies need to be measured differently. I think what probably is required, particularly for the developing countries, is how we socialize this agenda of beyond GDP. What it actually means, because we have a situation in many of these countries that are still struggling even to measure the current GDP as it is at the moment. And now we have this other measure that we say, look, we need to look at different indicators to measure our economics much more effective than where they are at the moment. So we need to really to have perhaps between ESCWA and ECA to run joint workshops, joint meetings, where we can socialize our countries. What does it actually mean for the national statistical offices? Which areas are we going to be emphasizing on? Because if we don't do it that way, they'll probably be thinking that we are trying to completely overhaul their systems, just not doing the national council as it is at the moment. And yet we are looking at the alternative. So I think the entry point should be, what is it that we can do? What can countries do to complement the current measurements? Are there areas we can already begin to pick where we think that we can begin to move that? Is it the systems of economic accounting, looking at the natural capital accounting. Maybe there are issues there which needs to be taken into account, issues of emission of carbon and so forth. Is there something that we can do about it? That socialization, I think, is very, very important. I also want to suggest that perhaps as part of the discussion at UNSC, though a bit too late now, maybe we would have been thinking of a joint event, a side event, which we could have done between yourselves and us, and maybe bring in UNSD, again, to discuss really what are the issues, and to have a proper buy-in from us, from the globe as well. So those are just my preliminary thoughts at the moment, but I think it's important we socialize, we allow countries to really begin to think through, by, of course, with our guidance, what is it that we are talking about. And I think the reason we are not even getting questions from the countries, partly because of that. It's not very well articulated what we are trying to achieve into this new measurement, which complements the GDP. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. Thank you. Yes, and this event is one of those joint meetings that we would like to engage our countries to provide their priorities, what they think, and what do they want us to work on. I see the hand of our colleague Mustafa Khawaja, who in previous life was in a statistical office in Palestine. Mustafa, you would like to intervene?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Wafa. Thank you for all of this presentation. But seems that while I'm raising my hand, Oliver had my thoughts as he was around. But actually, let me be a bit wider than what he called it, socialization. We are talking about the official statistics. And once we are talking about official statistics, we still need to have this nationally driven process. And if we also want to link it with the SDGs agenda, that means we have to be behind the countries in their approaches. Now, the role of the UN agencies, ESCWA, ECLAC, ICA, all of these regions, to accelerate the work on how we can institutionalize the work that we believe that it is very useful for the countries in the context of their own, based on their in-house discussion. And I see that all of the approaches that we are talking about, the beyond, for example, once we are talking about the informal sector and its contribution in the GDP, and now we are talking about the beyond GDP, how this is vary from country to another, how we can make the resilience as one of the pillars to be considered based on the context of the country. And you know, Wafa and the colleagues all now the complexity of the situations in our countries, although it's very and has their commonalities, but we still need to have more power from the countries, from the national processes, in order to not speeding or accelerating our work only, but also to have a clear image on that. About the substantial part, actually, I'm not the good one to talk about it, and it may take me longer to have my substantial feedback on the content. But let's talk about, I will stop here about just the process and how we can enhance it. Maybe workshops, but also we need national initiatives, also not only the regional one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mustafa. Yeah, and yes, it's very important to have the country like their own policies and their own targets and vision, and the organizations are there just to help to improve the measurements and making them standard and comparable. Yes, you are absolutely right. And this is why it takes too long. It takes too long, like to consult with countries and work with them. Not like, many organizations like, just collecting data and then ranking the countries without them being involved in this type of exercises. Any other comment? Okay, so yeah, maybe like I said, when we go over the presentations by the co-chairs of the network and by Tim, I think we will have more ideas for asking questions and providing comments. I would like Vincent to now take the floor to introduce the network and moderate the session that's coming up.
Yes, thank you, Wafa. Hello, everyone again. As you can see, Session 3 will present the findings of the UN Network of Economic Statisticians from the Beyond GDP consultations. In this session, we will have 3 presentations. Mr. Andre Lollinger from Statistics Canada and the co-chair of the Network of Economic Statisticians will give a presentation introducing the network as well as the Beyond GDP sprint. And then after that, we'll have Mr. Tim Miller from the UN Population Division giving a presentation on the system for demographic economic accounting. And this will basically talk about various national transfer accounts. And then the third presentation will be done by Mr. Richard Hayes from the UK Office of National Statistics, and he will present this proposal to develop a system for inclusive and sustainable well-being, covering the metrics for the economy, society, and the environment. And then after each session, we will have a short question and answer segment. So please feel free to raise your hand to answer questions or post your questions in the chat. And then during or after each presentation, we will also conduct a poll, whereby a number of questions related to the presentation will be posted by our colleague from ESQA. Wafa, can you confirm that this will be posted in the chat, the questions for the poll? Am I right?
Yes, Vincent. After the presentation, that there will be a polling question.
Okay, and they will be posted in the chat, right? Yeah.
Yes, the link will be posted in the chat.
Yeah, thank you. So, please feel free to answer the questions in the poll after the end of each presentation. And then, so without further delay, we'll move on to the first presentation by Andre. So over to you, please, Andre.
Okay, thank you, Benson. Let me take a second to share my screen. Hopefully that'll work. Let me know if if this pops up on the screen. I'm getting the message that my screen is being shared, but I don't see anything on the screen.
Andre, yes, but can you move to the slideshow?
Yeah, I'm doing that now.
Okay, it takes a while to transit to
So
slideshow.
while the system is catching up to the clicking of the buttons, maybe I'll just start. The goal of the presentation today is really to outline what the network is, our working methods, and where we're going next. Sort of my presentation is a bit of an overview. The details with respect to the Beyond GDP are really going to be presented by my colleagues Tim and Richard. But as a bit of an introduction, maybe I can start with with talking about sort of how the network was created. And I think Benson, in his opening remarks at the beginning of the session, touched on that a bit. So the network was created at the 52nd session of the Statistical Commission. And really the goal is to facilitate networking, coordination, and communication for the purpose of measuring this idea of multidimensional relationships between the economy, society, and the environment. So it's, you know, our society is complex, and we need measures now that triangulate between the economy, society, and the environment. And that's really the goal of the network, is to try to facilitate these advances in the broader statistical system to ensure that we factor environmental considerations and social considerations when we think about the economy, and vice versa. So it's the first year of the network. I think we've made great progress as a network. However, we do have much work ahead as we figure out how the network will operate in the context of the broader statistical system. And
Andre, just a second. Which slide are you in?
Are you moving?
Well, I'm still in the intro, so I haven't moved my slides.
Fine. So you're fine.
Let me switch to my next slide, and so you.
It's working fine.
The overview, is it working for you? Perfect. Okay. So the objectives of the network are broad. I talked a lot about sort of triangulation between the economy and society and the environment. But we really want to sort of take a networking and collaboration approach to this. The goal of the network is not to take up or duplicate work that others are doing, that other networks are doing, that other expert groups are doing. Rather, we want to sort of build on those and network. So there's an aspect of our work which is sort of consultation with a number of these groups, such as what we're doing today. There's a big focus on experimentation, thinking about, okay, what measures do we need and how do we implement experimentation on those new measures. This idea again of integrating ideas. A big focus, you know, I think it is related to the governance and the institutional arrangements, and trying to facilitate some of those dialogues, thinking about new data solutions, documenting things. And as we do that, really rethink the statistical infrastructure and operations of the entire statistical system. Seems ambitious, but again, you know, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. We're just trying to, as there's an expression, grease the wheels, facilitate things, make linkages. That's really the goal of the network. So next slide. We have broad membership in the network. There's participation from a lot of the regional commissions and international statistical organizations, such as the IMF, the OECD, the UNSD, of course, and several countries. Right currently, Statistics Canada co-chairs the network with the Maldives, and we have a small bureau which drives, I suppose, our work plan forward. And as part of the bureau, we have the Netherlands, the UK, the United States, and of course, we're supported by the United Nations, the UNSD. The way that we've, the way that we've organized the work of the network is through this idea of sprints. So coming up with a theme, organizing sprints around that theme. We have 4 or 5 meetings. We bring together experts. We discuss the issues, and then as much as possible, we try to make recommendations. Today, we're going to focus a lot on the Beyond GDP sprint, but we've had other sprints. The first sprint was really about how do we organize the network? And this is where the idea of the sprints came about. We've done some sprints on the acquisition of private sector data to help the study of global value chains and how they're impacting, again, the economy and society and so on. We've done a sprint on what are the next directions with respect to owner-occupied housing in the consumer price index. And then we do have sprints on communications and outreach coming soon. So I'll switch slides again. So I'll talk a little bit about the Beyond GDP sprint. So in the last year, we've had 6 sprint sessions, and we've had a lot of participation. We've had a lot of participation in all the sprints, but I think the Beyond GDP sprints solicited a lot of interest. We had over 110 participants per session, many from statistical organizations around the world, from Europe, from North and South America, Australia, Asia, Africa. We've had a lot of participation from central banks, the World Bank, the Bank of England, for example, many international organizations, and also many experts and academics from around the world, and some are noted on the slide a bit. So what are the topics that we covered? Well, as you were listening to the earlier presentations, you'll see that a lot of these same themes are coming up, right? So we talked a lot about distributional and well-being initiatives associated with the update of the SMA. We talked about well-being initiatives associated with the extended system of national accounts, aggregate frameworks, and this includes time use and household satellite accounts. Talked a lot about capital and those that are included within the boundary of the national accounts and those that are excluded right now, and how we move those forward. We talked about beyond GDP indexes, many indicator frameworks and other work approaches, and also linking with data on population. So really sort of making the link to individuals in terms of the aggregates that we produce and sort of where that's going with respect to disaggregation of the national accounts. So what did we find? And again, I'm not going to talk very much about this. I'll leave that for Richard and Tim. But with respect to measuring well-being and sustainability, there are a lot of items that are within the next SMA update. And there's also a link with the Secretary General of the UN's Our Common Agenda. So really highlighting the fact that GDP alone is insufficient to measure success, and how do we achieve new metrics that capture the value of life and well-being in our decision making. So again, what we identified in our sprints is that, well, certainly we need to align with the themes that are coming out of the Secretary General's Our Common Agenda report, but also the SNA update. We need to develop improved dashboards and make a wider use of those distributional metrics that we've already talked about. Perhaps develop composite indexes, and certainly focus again on the wealth side of things. And develop inclusive wealth indicators and so on. We discussed and emphasized the need for an integrated statistical system for inclusive and sustainable well-being that would use a wide range of statistical standards and outputs to give a comprehensive picture of the modern world. And my colleagues will get into that a little bit in further detail. But the idea is to, we have system of national accounts and all the economic frameworks. We have the SIA that measures the environment. we need a similar system to track and aggregate the data on society. So this idea of population accounts and so on, and you need some framework to integrate all these things. So with respect to next steps, again, I just talked about this a second ago. It's this idea that we need a people-centered system which explains the relationships between the various indicators that are available today and their potential use. And it's this idea of developing framework that sort of makes linkages between the existing systems that will allow us to sort of develop well-being, social cohesion, and sustainability metrics. So again, thinking about sort of how we get there, well, what we've discussed and what the proposed system would leverage is ongoing work in many areas, including work that Wafa talked about in her presentation, such as national transfer accounts, quality of life indexes, so on. There's a list of indicators that's actually happening. Comprehensive income and comprehensive wealth with respect to the work that the World Bank is doing, human development indexes, and so on. So leveraging all those, all that work to come up with coherent linkages between all those data sets. Switch slides. So with respect to our timelines, I think they're quite ambitious. We're currently right now, working on consultations. At the March 2023 UN Statistical Commission, we will produce a report that outlines what we've done over the last year, and present as well a prospectus of what we're doing with respect to the Beyond GDP work, try to get some agreement on that. And once we have an agreement from the Commission on where we're going, and hopefully we'll get it. The idea is, next year, focus on really articulating thematic notes that bring us forward in terms of the plan that's articulated in the perspective. The following year at the UN Statistical Commission, we would seek feedback and comments on those thematic notes. Again, following that, to keep fleshing them out with the idea of submitting recommendations for these frameworks that I talked about at the March 2025 Statistical Commission. Now, this seems really ambitious right now, I think. I think it is. Nevertheless, I think we can make good progress on the way forward, and we're looking again to collaborate with many users and many players such as yourselves in terms of a collaboration toward these objectives. So again, the idea that as a network, we can't do everything, by ourselves. We'll need collaboration, and we do want to have collaboration. We will set up more sprints as we move forward. We will continue to discuss and have further consultations, particularly with the global south, and because the perspectives are really important from a global perspective. Again, the network doesn't have capacity to do all this work alone. A number of partners have been very good partners and have come forward with various ideas and so on, and are participating in our work. But that said, I think we do want to make sure to further engage with expert groups and task forces, and keep building our work together with all of you. And again, I think that's all I want to say about consultations. One thing I didn't mention with respect to the network we're focusing a lot today on the beyond GDP element, but it is the network of economic statisticians, and there are many issues beyond the GDP issue and the SNA update. And I'd certainly like to hear your perspectives on other economic measures that we need to sort of improve, and sort of particularly with respect to direction of the network. So I'll stop here, and I think, as the agenda said, we have a few minutes for questions before we move on to our next presenter, which I think will be Tim.
Yes, thank you, Andre, for this comprehensive presentation of the work of the network, as well as the work of the network on the Beyond GDP Springs. Okay, and now maybe, like you said, we'll go ahead with a quick question and answer session. So everyone, please feel free to raise your hand to ask Andre any question on the presentation. And also, if you don't want to ask the question verbally, you can also type the question in the Q&A window. Okay.
So I see in the
Anyone,
question, there's a question on participation of the network. So
yes.
In our terms of reference for the network, we wanted to periodically review membership. So when we did the first call out, the countries that you saw on the slide were the first ones to raise their hand and say we want to participate. So as we move forward, we'll be reviewing the membership, and we just talked about it recently at one of our bureau meetings. So the first thing is we're going to do that. The other option as well is as we have sprints on the various topics, those are announced by the UNSD, and sort of we're really trying to broadcast out, and the participation in the sprint is open to any who want to participate. So you can participate in two ways. But we will be reviewing very shortly the membership again, and the call up will come out soon on that. The other question is in Arabic, so I'm afraid I won't be able to.
I volunteer to translate, and I will also maybe provide some answers. The question is from from ACSAD. It's an organization that deals with drought in Arab countries. The question was, how will sustainability be maintained in an economic growth in light of the oil crisis, economic inefficiency in some countries, and the trend towards diversification of the economy, and depletion of non-renewable natural resources. So this is Dr. Suad Al-Shammat from ACSAD. It's a question that maybe I can reply to, and I wish you can help me with that. To be able to answer this question, you need the measurements, Dr. Saad. So that's where this is important. If you want to see how can sustainability be maintained, you need to gauge it somehow in the measurements that a country has to bring about, whether it's oil, natural resources, pollution. So it's really, this is what really answers your question. And it's a long work that the network and experts are working on to enable countries to make such measurements. Anything from your side?
Well, I think that was a very good answer, and I was thinking the same thing. For me, what we need to do as statisticians in all of this is provide frameworks and information for policymakers, and so that they can consider all the issues as they make decisions. So if we put together indicators and frameworks that point out and make the linkages between the economy, society, and the environment, then we provide frameworks for decision making. And that is how ultimately you will end up sort of addressing issues of sustainability and diversity and inclusion and all those things, is by showcasing that there are issues that need to be addressed. So thank you. That was a good question.
Maybe I can add, Andre, that the role of research institutes and centers is very important in this. And an organization or a research center like ACSAD, who works at the regional level on drought, food security, it has a lot to contribute to the work of the statistical offices and their partners to bring up the issues. And you mentioned in your presentation, Andre, that it's a sports, it's a team sports statistics. Yes. And maybe you didn't mention that countries should work with each other within a country. So this is also very, very important at the national level to have this partnerships between the ministries and the statistical offices and the players. But in many countries, research centers and academia are also very important actors in such big questions, providing insights, data, and helping integrating with statistical offices. Andre, you have another question. You can read it.
Well, the one I see is how countries join and collaborate in the network. And I think I answered that initially. Yes. Unless there's another question.
Andre, there's a comment in the chat about difficulty in getting data, and also the quality of the data. I'm not sure if you want to respond to this. Yeah.
Well, I think that comment is very pertinent, very relevant. I think, that's the challenge for national statistical organizations around the world. At Statistics Canada, we've embarked on a modernization initiative to become more user-centric. But when we have consultations with users, particularly on the economic side, but also sort of in other domains, we hear three things come out all the time. And I like to summarize those three comments into three words: bigger, better, faster. Every consultation we have with users, they want more information, they want more timely information, they want more granular information, and so on. And this is a real challenge. As we think about where we're going with the network and the frameworks that we're talking about now, the beyond GDP, the S&A discussion, it's really about providing more detail. And the challenge is that a lot of the things that we're trying to measure that we need answers for requires a lot of data. And I think as statistical organizations, first of all, we can't do everything by ourselves. The idea of partnerships is really, really important. Where does that data exist? How do we access it? And how do we convert it into, how do we bring it into our structures to provide insights for policymakers? That's a real big challenge. And I think we need to do better as an organization. I don't have all the answers here. But I know that we do need to prioritize access to data. This is fundamental.
Yes, thank you, Andre, for the response. I think at this stage, maybe I want to ask Wafa, can we move on since there are no more questions from anyone in the Q&A window, and we don't have any raised hands. Wafa, can we move on to the next presentation?
Yeah, yes, because we thought the polling questions, when Tim presents his part, there will be more information, and the questions will have more relation to what he's going to present.
Okay, thank you, Wafa. And again, to round up, thank you once again, Andre, for this very comprehensive presentation. And also thank you to those who have asked questions after and make comments after the presentation by Andre. So we are right on time, and so perhaps we'll move on to the next presentation. So it will be over to you, Tim. Yeah.
Great, thanks very much. I'm going to attempt to share my screen.
Tim, you can introduce yourself meanwhile.
Yeah.
Well, I'm Tim Miller. I'm a global advisor on population and development here in UN DESA. And this morning, I'm going to be talking about demographic economic accounting. And let me put my slideshow into presentation mode.
Yep.
Okay, if all's going well, you should be seeing my title slide.
It looks great. Yeah, we can see the first slide. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Beautiful. So I'll just jump right in. So like climate change, demographic shifts are a megatrend impacting sustainable development. And so, of course, I'm from population. So, of course, I'm going to think population is important. But it's not just me. So here's a quote from the UN Economist Network, and they've identified 5 megatrends impacting sustainable development. Climate change, of course, number 1, that's right there at the top of their list. But a second factor there is demographic shifts, particularly population aging. So that's what I'm going to be talking about this morning. Okay, so population change impacts inclusive and sustainable development. Why is that? Well, population age structure is changing rapidly around the world. And we know that many economic activities vary by age and gender. And by the way, these age and gender differences are changing too. So these end up having important implications for economic growth, for the sustainability of systems of financial support, both from families, from the state, from governments, and also from financial markets. And then finally, these have implications for inequality by age, by gender, by socioeconomic group, and by generation. So what I'm going to talk about this morning are something called national transfer accounts, and these provide the link between population and the economy. So they're occupying that middle zone there that I've marked in red. Okay, so the national transfer accounts think about the flow of economic resources from the perspective of individuals. So I'm going to just step you through what the balancing equation looks like in national transfer accounts for each individual. So as I go through these steps, you should just be thinking of yourself, your own situation, your own economic situation. And see, actually, that's one of the nice advantages or one of the strengths of the NTA approach is that it really brings economic statistics down to the level of the individual, and so makes them very relatable. Okay, so you can think first about labor earnings. So folks are working in labor markets, both formal and informal sector. They're receiving income from that work, and they then have consumption needs. So they spend that money on things, food, clothing, shelter, etc. Now, these labor earnings do not meet the consumption needs of most individuals, for example, children and older persons. Another flow that we look at are asset income, right? Financial markets. So we can consider savings for retirement. So one use of income for individuals is to save, and then later in retirement, they can make claims on those savings through asset income. Thirdly, public transfers. These are government provided benefits, and the taxes that support them are also very important in this system of flows. So we measure the public transfers received by individuals, so that is education, healthcare benefits, in some countries, pension benefits provided by the government. And these are funded through taxes taxes on individuals. And then the final component are private transfers. Private transfers received both within a household and also between households. And of course, these private transfers are then also given. So we have this complete system of accounts measuring flows that balance. So the amount of labor earnings you make, plus your asset income, plus the public transfers you receive from the government, plus any private transfers you receive both within your household and from other households. Those collectively represent the resources that you receive, and then you make use of those resources either in consumption, savings, paying taxes, or giving private transfers. These systems, this NTA system, National Transfer Account System, is derived from the system of national accounts. So you can kind of think of it as a type of satellite account. So we begin with the standard equation of consumption plus savings is equal to primary income plus transfers. And then our first stage in NTA is to disaggregate that by age. So we're looking at age profiles of each of these main aggregates. And then we rearrange this to look at something we call the life cycle deficit, which is this gap between your consumption and earnings. So the NTAs provide this kind of comprehensive accounting framework to measure the economic life cycle. So we're looking at individuals from birth until death. So we're looking at how children, youth, adults, older persons support themselves and, importantly, are supporting each other through financial markets, these private or family transfers, and government transfers as well. And so I think has been pointed out many times today, this is not designed to replace the system of national accounts. It's a complement to that system. So as I just walked you through, NTAs measure are looking at individuals. So our focus is on individuals. And so this gives us a life cycle perspective. So we're, again, looking at individuals from birth through death. And by looking at age structure, we're able to link this to population projections. So it gives us a long run perspective of these likely economic impacts of changing population age structure. So the NTAs, what I've been talking about thus far, measure the market economy. Okay, so we're using household income and expenditure surveys and administrative data to look at the market economy. That's in NTA. Now, NTTA, which stands for National Time Transfer Accounts, adds production, consumption, and transfers of unpaid care work by age and gender. And so that relies on time use surveys. So that's critical. I think that was mentioned earlier today as one of the priorities, statistical priorities of UNECA and UNESCO as well, that the need for time use surveys in countries. And so that's critically important if we're going to measure unpaid care work. So NTAs, these have now been implemented in 82 countries, and NTTAs, National Time Transfer Accounts, in 20 countries in all world regions. So here, I'm just going to show you what national transfer accounts look like. These are consumption and labor earnings per person by age, and this is based off of information collected by Professor Mornay in the University of Cape Town, South Africa. And these are for South Africa in the year 2005. And so the blue line is showing you average average consumption per person. So starting at birth, we see it starts to increase, reaching a peak, that blue line reaching a peak about age 50, and then declining thereafter. Now, the orange line is showing you labor earnings, and you see labor earnings beginning to take off around age 20, then ramping up, then fairly flat over the age range 40 to around 55 or so, and then declining thereafter. Again, this making the point then that the blue line, that consumption needs, are in excess of labor earnings, both for the young persons and for older persons in the population. How how are those needs met? How are those consumption needs met? Well, they're met in large part through transfers. And that's why the system is called national transfer accounts, to kind of stress the importance of transfers in supporting this economic life cycle. So in the blue line here, I'm showing, or these again is based on information from South Africa, the year 2005. We're looking at net. Let's take the blue line first. We're looking at net public transfers. So that is the amount of benefits you receive less the taxes you pay. So you see that that blue line is positive in the young ages, showing a net receipt of benefits, mainly in healthcare and in education, of course. Then those net public transfers turn negative before returning positive again briefly at the older ages. And so that's for how the government is operating to redistribute resources between age groups. The orange line is showing you private transfers. That is how mainly families, are redistributing resources within households and between households. And you see a big influx of resources, of course, for children, but also up for young adults, up through almost age 30, are net recipients of familial transfers. And these are given mainly by folks in the working ages, but also by older persons. So you see that on average, older persons are making transfers to younger persons in South Africa. Okay, now let's turn to look at national time transfer accounts. Again, these are based on time use surveys. And here we're looking at data from Professor Latif Dramani and data for Senegal of the year 2016. And on the left-hand side, we see what might be a typical pattern of market-based work. This is the number of hours worked per week. The blue line is men and the red line is women. And you see these, again, ramping up the number of hours worked per week, stabilizing and then declining in older age, and that men are more engaged in market work than women. So that's the left-hand side of the graph. Now, the right-hand side of the graph shows us total work. So including market-based work as well as unpaid care work. And here you see, I guess the only point I want to make here is that there's a big difference between what you see on the left-hand side of the chart here and then the right-hand side. So the right-hand side, when we measure total work, a very different picture emerges. First off, of the relative contributions of men and women in these societies, in Senegal, for example. And then secondly, in what the age pattern of work looks like. When we actually withdraw from work over the life cycle. Okay, so I had mentioned before that the National Transfer Account actually consists of a network. So this is more than 200 individuals working on this project in 82 country teams. So 22 of these teams are led or co-led by national governments, but the majority are based in universities or research centers. 2 of the national statistics offices have instituted NTA as part of their official national statistics, that is Colombia and the Republic of Korea. So the NTAs, by having a common framework across all these 82 countries, give us a unique data source for international comparisons. And here I'm just showing one example, which is we're looking at government transfers to youth on the vertical axis and government transfers, net transfers to older persons on the horizontal axis. And we see this strong positive correlation. That is, governments that are involved in supporting youth are also involved in supporting older persons. Again, just to stress that this is a very unique source of information for international comparisons. Here we're looking at both public and private human capital investments, that is investments in healthcare and education for youth. The left-hand side is showing us the percent of GDP devoted to investments in human capital and youth. And it's fairly flat line. I'm comparing this against the size of the youth population in the respective countries. The right-hand side shows us this strong pattern of those with smaller youth populations are able to devote much more resources to investments in human capital. But there's significant variation among countries, even holding the demography constant. So demography is very important in driving this relationship, but it's not a determinant. Okay, so in the last 4 minutes, I'd like to conclude by looking at some regional efforts in NTA and TTA. I'm going to focus on West and Central Africa here. So there really is a very strong regional partnership underway there with, on the one hand, this consortium of this regional consortium looking at the generational economy, CREG, based out of Senegal, and the UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund, both for West and Central Africa and also Eastern and Southern Africa, and also the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. And so some of the things these groups have been involved in, we just had the second NTA Africa conference, October 27th through 29th in 2021 in Senegal. Prior to that, there was a think tank, an expert group meeting on the generational economy. That was a virtual meeting held in November of 2020. And then there have been series of national training workshops in NTA and NTTA, both. And there's been a system of demographic dividend observatories that have been established. I'll talk more about that in a second. And a lot of the focus in Africa has been on harnessing the demographic dividend, harnessing this period, this unique period in time when the population becomes concentrated in the working ages, and how to best exploit that for economic growth and inclusion. And they are working on this demographic dividend sensitive budgeting, DDSB, that's been done for 9 countries in West Africa, trying to draw out the implications of national transfer accounts for policy decisions about investment in education and healthcare. There's a series of publications, of course, that have come out, and I'll provide a link in the chat in a second for accessing these publications. Okay, and then just briefly to wrap up here. So the United Nations providing support through the UN Secretariat, so that's DESA and all the economic commissions, but also through the UNFPA. So UNFPA, the Population Fund, has been supporting national transfer accounts for more than a decade, supporting countries in Africa, the Americas, Asia, and Europe. And then again, focusing on Western and Central Africa Regional Office, there have been 22 national demographic dividend roadmaps done, 433 national experts trained, 21 national profiles completed, a series of policy briefs, and focusing on, again, this critical issue about time allocation, time use surveys. Now they focused again, they've been focusing on how to operationalize this concept of the demographic dividend. There are 22, I had already gone through that. Let's go on to the next slide. So the demographic dividend observatories, there are 9 demographic dividend observatories which have been completed so far. The countries listed there at the bottom. These are groups that involve, you can see various partnerships. So it's the National Statistics Offices, but also universities involved, ministries of planning, and of course, also backed by the UNFPA. There's a system for a monitoring system for looking at the demographic dividend. There are national development plans about how to integrate the demographic dividend into national planning. Now, to conclude, what are we doing here in New York? We work on manuals. So we produce manuals on how to measure the generation and gendered economy. So I'll put a link in the chat in a second to show you where to get these manuals if you're interested in reading more, or perhaps even interested in joining the project. you can take a look at those manuals and let us know what you think. So again, we're disaggregating national accounts by age, by gender, and finally by socioeconomic group. We provide capacity building workshops on how to estimate NTA and use NTA as well as NTTA as well. We're now involved in a project over the next 4 years to look at what we're calling national inclusion accounts, which are to look at this economic life cycle, but breaking it down by educational groups. Okay, so I'll just stop there. Thank you very much. And I'll stop sharing. And open it up for questions.
Yes, thank you, Tim, for this comprehensive overview of NPAs and so on. Like you say, we'll open the floor for questions. And like I said before, you can either raise your hand to ask Tim a question, or you can post your question in the Q&A window. So anyone wants to go first? No? No. Yes, there's something in the chat thing. Okay, you posted.
Yeah, that's
something.
me. I'm posting to myself.
Okay, yeah.
That's a link to the NTA manual if people want to read that. And I'm going to put in a couple more
Okay.
links about other resources that they can read at their leisure.
Okay. Maybe this is something new to many of the participants here, so they're a bit shy about asking questions.
Maybe we can ask any of the countries who joined the project, like what's their, I saw it, there's only Egypt from Arab countries who are members of the NTA project.
And see something else in the chat.
Yeah, I'm still posting links.
Okay, no problem.
But we do have a survey coming up.
Yes.
Or a poll, rather.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think if there are no questions, we can send the link to the questions to the poll. They relate to the presentations of Tim and Andre. So maybe we can send the link, and we hope that everybody can answer the questions. You have the questions in front of you. If you need any help in translating in anything, you can send us a chat, but they are straightforward, and we hope you help us gauge your views and preferences on the subjects.
Wafa, how much time will they be given to answer the poll? Yeah.
I mean, 10 minutes.
Okay. Wafa, please let us know once time's up. Yeah, thanks.
We still have 2 minutes. So بنشجع المشاركين إنه يردوا على الأسئلة. وإذا في أي سؤال حول الأسئلة بعتوا لنا بالشات.
Team, are you still here? Yeah.
So we'll end the poll now.
Okay. Thank you, Wafa. Okay. Sorry, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we hear you, Vincent.
Okay, thank you. Wafa, do you want me to summarize the poll results or you want to do so?
No, you go ahead.
Okay, thank you. As you can see, the poll has 3 questions. The first one is on how you rate the importance of distributing the economic aggregates derived from national accounts to individuals by various attributes like age, gender, economic, social groups, and so on, to understand the economic lives of these individuals. And think or a majority of the participants, or over 50% of the participants, say that it's very important. The remaining 43% say it's important. No one says it's not important at all. The second question asks, do you support the key findings of the sprints, like progress and strategic direction of the UN Network of Economic Statisticians? 90% of those who responded say yes, and 10% say no. It'll be interesting to ask those who say no what exactly they would like the network to do in terms of improving its work, so that we can contribute more to the system of economic statistics. The third question asks, which of the following potential new topics for sprints do you find important for your country or organization? We have quite a mixed bag of responses. 30% would like more mapping and characterizing beyond GDP, existing beyond GDP frameworks to be done. 20% would like more work done, sprints on comparing inclusive and comprehensive wealth and indicators. Another 20% would like sprints on comparing distributional accounting methods like DINA. And then 23% would like sprint on scoping the proposed system of population and social accounts. I think that's all I have to say. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those who answered. And I would like to note that in the polling question in Zoom, we don't have the option to have open questions. That's why we had most of the questions asked in a way of multiple choice or yes or no. Yeah. But like Vincent said, it's very important to get your ideas, and this will be in the chat and in the comments. So yes, we look forward to hear more on priorities, what we want to work on, not only the polling questions that you have.
Wafa, I see Mustafa has raised his hand. Mustafa, you have a question or comment, please? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. After this long session, so intensive, very rich of the information. Thank you very much. And my comment just on the evaluation sheet, which showed us that the 4 areas that being asked for, more or less, we are talking about the same distribution, which means because the question was allowed only single answer. So the results showed that we are in need for all of the areas. Now, the prerequisite for any of our work is the mapping. So since only 37, I think, if I still recall, percentage of the surveyed participants said that it's 37, means that we still have 63 still need mapping of their work. 37 they are need mapping. So at least we have 1/3 of the participants would like to start from the mapping of the work, which means that we are still in the principle. This comment just to bring the attention that we are in need for extensive work together with the countries, with the experts over the time for the next future. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Mustafa. It's quite a valid comment. Certainly, you have some work ahead of us, given the fact that we are moving towards developing measures that are complementary to GDP. Okay. Are there any more questions or comments before we move on to the presentation by Richard Hayes? Okay, so it looks like no.
I have
sorry,
sorry, yes, I just have one. We have a contribution, a presentation from Giovanni Savio. He wasn't able to intervene, but we posted it on the website. It's on distribution and national accounts. And it's at the household level, so it's very interesting. They did it in the case of Italy from Istat, and just it relates to what Tim presented, and you know, it's an interesting thing to look at. We would like just to note that it is on the website. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Wafa. Thank you. Mustafa, your hand is raised. I think that is for the previous question, right? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, once again, thank you, Tim, for this comprehensive overview of NTAs. And also thank you to those who asked questions and also to those who participated in the poll. And now, without any, sorry, I see something in the chat. Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, so without any delay, we'll move on to Richard Hayes from the UK ONS, who will give a presentation on the proposed system for to measure well-being, inclusion, and sustainability. So, Richard, over to you, please.
Thank you. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. So I hope very much you'll shortly see some slides, and I hope you'll see them in full screen mode. Is that right, Vincent?
Not yet. I think you have to enable editing. Go to the top of your screen. There's this enable editing button. Please click on it first. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Oh, hang on. No, it didn't like that. Let me have another go. There you go. Hopefully this time will be okay. So it might just be catching up with us. So in
Now
my
it looks
presentation,
good. Yeah. It looks good.
Good.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks.
Excellent. So in my presentation, I'm going to take you through some more detailed aspects of the outcomes of the Beyond GDP sprint. And just to trail some of the key things that I'll be talking about, particularly the aspects that were picked up in the last question on the quiz around how we map and understand the different metrics which are already produced. I'm pleased to say that's a large part of what I'm going to be talking about today. So I'm very, very, very pleased to see that that aligns with the areas of interest that have been expressed today. I also want to say a big thank you. It's a privilege to get to present these slides to you. So I co-chaired this sprint series, a series of 6 sprints that Andre's already talked about, co-chaired with Eric Strasner, formerly of the BEA, now at the IMF. And we started off, I think, in much the same place as many other teams who have looked at this over the years, using the Stiglitz-Fitoussi and Sen report as a strong foundation for our basic argument and our basic requirement to look at the global debate around beyond GDP, around the wide variety of metrics, frameworks and measures which have been introduced over the years, and to think about where we wanted to go next and how to find a way, if we could, to begin to propose a framework for capturing this work, and to find, as I think as a number of people have stressed, a way to complement and build upon the information we have in GDP and the national accounts, rather than an assumption that we would be rebuilding or amending those. We very much took the current system of national accounts revision as a given in the work that we had been undertaking. Now, why did we feel there was a need for more work? I think we had identified fairly early that there is a wide range and a growing range of users who have a wide and growing range of different statistical needs. This doesn't in any way take away from those traditional users of GDP, your finance ministries, your central banks, who require a measure that relates to the activity that they can tax, or the activity which is affected by interest rates. But there are many who want to use data to get a wider perspective of their economies, of their societies, and it was a real pleasure to see Oliver and the other speakers earlier today very much highlighting that this is a common problem for all of us. Again, the UN Secretary General's Our Common Agenda recognise the need to very much start from this place of assuming that we're looking to find complements for GDP and the traditional economic measures. And I'm going to talk a bit more about how we wanted to take upon and do that, but very much emphasizing this point that we want to build upon the manuals and the existing guidance that exists. We live in an age where very, very significant work has been undertaken by the statistics community in these areas for a prolonged period of time, and we want to build upon that rather than start again. So key findings from the sprint. When we talk about beyond GDP, beyond is the key word. We found that there were lots of statistical bodies or academics or other actors who didn't necessarily see that they were part of the beyond GDP space, this trade-off, this understanding this trade-off between the economy, the environment, and society. They didn't see that they were part of what we might call a beyond GDP debate. They had many other ways of phrasing it, words like well-being, welfare, inclusion. But as we started to talk and build networks through the sprints, I think we found people seeing the linkages and seeing the wider linkages beyond maybe the traditional partners that we work with. And there's a little quote there from someone who was involved in the sprints about realizing that they were part of the beyond GDP agenda and the community and seeing how to make the connections. So for us, this tells us that there's a key area that we need to do to reach out and to work with non-traditional partners in different statistical domains, academia, and so on. Partly, this is also because the way we think about certain things has been taken up and used a lot more widely than just in the traditional domain of economic statistics. So looking at the UN's set of domains of statistics, the green boxes along the bottom describe the different categories of capital, which we in various efforts in the sprint looked at. And one of the things we identified was not just that they have manuals in very different places, but actually in completely different domains, starting from very much different assumptions, often trying to draw on common themes and to learn from one another. But the opportunity to actually think about these in a more consistent and coherent way, I think, is something that we very much wanted to take forward. So human capital, which is mentioned a few times, is a really nice example of this, where we have a manual which has been assembled by the UNECE. We have clarity on how this relates to the SNA and the core sequence of accounts. We have a satellite account model which countries can deliver. But this really focuses on stocks, and it doesn't answer the difficult question of education and healthcare, which are captured in the system of national accounts in the core accounts, what we would do or how we would tackle it if we saw those as investment rather than normal spending. It's perfectly possible to see that there is sufficient in the way of guidance for us to begin to draw together some of these data in experimental ways and to look on how we build upon the satellite account model. But there are still some conceptual gaps that we need to think about in terms of what does depreciation, depletion, revaluation look like in this space. Investment might have its difficulties in terms of how you see it, in terms of how to treat it alongside the national accounts, which don't treat education and healthcare as investment. But thinking about how we treat depletion, depreciation consistently, I think is equally important. So our next key finding from the sprint was that the current landscape is overly complex, and that users find this very challenging, in the sense that as a statistics community, we can identify a huge amount of work which has gone on since Stiglitz, Sen and Fitoussi, and some before that. A recent effort by an academic identified several hundred different metrics which have been produced and applied to one or more countries which fall into this beyond GDP space. And I've very much just listed some of them on here, ones which I hope people will be familiar with. Because I think the part of the jigsaw that we need to think about how we deliver is not necessarily creating more metrics. There are plenty and enough metrics out there, and the world is big enough to accommodate them, I think. What we more need to think about is how we categorize them, how we map them, and how we help navigate users to the right metric for their needs. it may be that some of these metrics are more successful and are more pertinent than others and get greater traction. But I think we shouldn't be afraid of helping our users find the best tool for their needs, and to signpost that those which are attracting more usage, to highlight the need for us to think about making sure that they cover more countries or more time periods to help more users to develop to use these for their own purposes. What I proposed on here is a very simple categorization to help us begin to think about this, but this very much is an area where we are still very much open to suggestions and support. So in our proposed way forward, I think we, as Andre has flagged, have recognized the need that we need to integrate the parts of the system that already exist, to give greater clarity on the range of options on systems and outputs which are available, and try to give a much more comprehensive picture of our societies and economies, and to really give a clear framework which helps users to utilize what already exists. As I say, we're not in the business of trying to develop lots and lots of new metrics or encouraging lots and lots of new work, because there is so much out there coming from multiple sources that we can already use. But there may be areas where we can highlight that two bodies are working in almost consistent ways, and whether there is benefits in bringing those together, whether there is feasibility in feasible ways to extend existing methods to either cover more countries or time periods, or fill in gaps where we identify them and think they are an absolute priority. But the heart of what we want to do is to recycle and signpost wherever possible. So we've broken this into two parts, and Tim and Andre have described this. Obviously, we're in a world where we have a well-developed system of national accounts. Are developing their work around a system of economic and environmental accounts, and it was really heartening to see the number of countries being able to provide so many different parts of that data that was reported on earlier. But I think we're still in the position that the system of national accounts is very much more developed, is very much more utilized, and in some ways it's very easy to fall into the trap of viewing the system of national accounts as was described by one sprint attendee as an apex predator that sort of gobbles up all the interesting items in this space and documents them because it is the one place that's currently being done and done comprehensively. But it does run the risk of then becoming very bloated and losing its focus. So what we've proposed is a two-part addition to the system. A system of population and social accounts. Tim has described some of the core building blocks that would be utilized here. This is not a new idea. Following the 1968 S&A being completed, the academic and statistical team that worked on that then moved across to begin to think about how they could tackle developing something like a system of population and social accounts, or population and demographic accounts, and did a lot of the thinking about how to do it, but in an environment where many countries did not have the data to populate it. And so in a world where there now is greater data availability, where many countries have made very significant steps in this area, the opportunity to think about how we combine and recycle the existing guidance and support which is available in that space and provide more clarity and structure around that does seem to us to be worth returning to and looking at properly. With so many of the building blocks in place, it does feel that there is the potential to make some rapid progress in that space. Alongside this is the idea of a central framework for inclusive and sustainable well-being. I think here our aims, as I've listed there, would be to think about the variety of dashboards which are in place, thinking about what a comprehensive dashboard could look like, which could be used by multiple countries, thinking about how we capture inclusion and sustainability, thinking about wealth measures, thinking about various distributional measures, all of which very much marry up with the things that we've been talking about thus far. Again, from the starting point that many of these building blocks are in place, and what we need to be helping to do is to signpost and to navigate people to the right product, and explaining how those products differ from one another. So just to say a few things about the system of population and social accounts, I'm sure you'll all have noticed that we go by the branding of the UN Network of Economic Statisticians, and it really isn't our place, and we don't want it to be our place, and we don't claim it's our place to tell the social statistics world how to organize itself. That's very definitely not our call, and we're not claiming it to be. But in parallel to the UN network, which came out of the Economic Friends of the Chair group, there is work to develop a Friends of the Chair group for social statistics. There are obviously many international organizations, UNESCO, UNICEF, who have published guidance, the WHO, on how to do components of this. And we very much are looking to support and encourage those groups in thinking about the benefits of this and how they could develop it forward. And clearly we can offer technical support in how to think about these things from an accounting point of view on the basis of the work that we've all done over many years to develop this for the economic side. Obviously, it's a process which will have to be taken in a stepwise manner, thinking about identifying and mapping guidance materials, very much in line with the feedback we've just had, developing chapter headings or a skeleton of contents, aiming to give a clear direction of travel to people to think about what they are most interested in, where we most need to focus, and then finding owners for drafting of text. And again, this doesn't all need to be delivered simultaneously. Some areas, the existing guidance may just need us to literally signpost to, this is the document, just use that. Other areas, there may be 3 or 4 documents, and there may need to be some help to guide people to navigate their way through the system. So we very much want to find the right partners to work on this, as Andre said, the debate and to guide discussions, but we're very much looking for partners to help tackle some of these key topics. But in this area, we very much want to be playing a supporting role rather than a leading one. In terms of the central framework for inclusive and sustainable well-being, we feel a bit more well-placed to play more of an active part. But I think even here, we are very, very strongly aware that what we're talking about is a forum within which environmental statisticians, social statisticians, and economic statisticians can bring their data together to help us to understand and define well-being, thinking about those key components, thinking about how to present the work, and to keep it in the realms of the feasible. A perfect definition of well-being would in some way be a recipe for human happiness. And I think whilst we're ambitious, we definitely don't think we can achieve that. But I think we can see key factors which play key roles in being proxies for well-being or drivers of well-being, which are worth us attempting to capture. We're keen to describe existing metrics and measures. And very much the sort of proposal to start is a 1-pager per product, which gives you some idea of the key methods, the key assumptions, which countries are covered, which time periods are covered, and importantly, where do you find the material? You know, even today, you know, we've had waves talked about, we've had multidimensional sustainability talked about. You know, there's a whole range of items there which I don't know about you, but I find it often very, very difficult to find and navigate my way around the system. So I very much hope that that will need to be a document that we keep live, but which is able to help us to navigate ourselves and our partners to the right data. We want to categorize and map that data and give more of a feel for what types of products exist, when to use one type of product over another. We also know that many countries have developed their own dashboards, either using subsets of the SDGs or other data tailored to their own particular requirements. I mentioned earlier that the UK is currently consulting on its wellbeing dashboard. One of the areas that we want to review is, are there common aspects that many countries are using? For those countries who are thinking about starting a dashboard, utilizing the learning that other countries have gone through, that other similar countries are implementing, we can see real benefit. But importantly, we also see that there will always be a need for each individual country to want to tailor their dashboards, if they want to use that type of model, to their own particular needs. And we think it's really important that guidance is out there to support, but it gives space for that tailoring to happen. And then finally, areas for further development, because as we go through this, we will find topics and questions where there is potential for further work and for new partnerships to take forward the agenda. And we want to help to signpost that next generation of work into areas that we think are the most beneficial. Alongside this, we are currently in the process of starting to map our sprints for next year. We generally, at the moment, we've only had 1 year of operation, but we've generally run the sprints during the spring and early summer, and then reported on them, gathered data in the autumn, and then reported on them in the winter. And I think we very much aim to run a similar model. We're not going to run all of the continuously, and some will be bigger than others. But these are the areas that at the moment we could see us being able to deliver sprints which move us in the right direction. They're not going to answer all the questions, but they are going to start to assemble some of the information that we want to produce. As I say, I think in all areas, we very much recognize that there is a need for us to go step by step, but we want each step to deliver something meaningful and beneficial which people can use. So in terms of mapping and characterizing existing beyond GDP frameworks, I think that that's very likely to be a sprint where a lot of the activity might happen outside the sprint sessions, where we ask various organizations to describe on a one page of what they're doing, and us then putting those together and compiling them. Proposed timelines, I think here, we're all working statisticians. I'm at the ONS, Andre's in Canada. We have other partner members in the Maldives and various other places, and we all recognize the constraints we're all under. The S&A process is very intensive at the moment. Guidance notes continue to be released, and the testing period is about to commence, and we recognize that that puts a real capacity constraint on many countries to do a lot in this space. We want to very much do what we can, but to not overwhelm. And I think we're all in that boat. The second major constraint is that, of course, data integration, or thinking about how we use more of these methods or expand these methods, requires data to exist. And in many countries, there may be stages where we need to think more about assembling the data rather than producing more complex analytics of that data. And so we need to think about how fast and how best to integrate that into the process. So at the moment, in addition, that's timeline that Andre showed earlier about how we're going to relate and report back on our progress to the UN Stats Commission. In terms of our sort of working model, for the next 2 or 3 years, we want to let the economic statistics community conclude its S&A and BPM work. We want to do the steps to get that partnership in place with the social statistics community to take on development of the SPSA. And we want to continue to run sprints to populate components, or to give us the information to start to think about how to populate components as a central framework. From 2025 onwards, we very much hope that as we come out of the S&A, we'll be able to maintain our pace and to begin to populate the two frameworks properly, and to keep those, particularly the central framework, alive and up to date with changes as that data landscape evolves. And finally, for those of you who don't have Benson's email, I've taken the liberty of using him as a central point. If any of those topics or issues interest you and you'd like to attend a sprint session or a set of sprint sessions, we'd be very, very keen to have you. Every perspective is vital on this, and so if you'd like to register an interest to take part, please do so. Please do so. We'd be delighted to have you on board. And that's the end of my slides, and I will stop sharing.
Yes, thank you, Richard, for presenting this proposal to to develop some kind of a framework to measure sustainability, well-being, inclusion, and so on. Again, we'll now open the floor to questions and comments. As before, you can either raise your hand if you want to speak verbally, or you can type your question in the Q&A window. So anybody wants to go first, please? Oh, yes.
Sorry, Benson, can you see a question?
Actually, no, nothing in the Q&A window.
Okay, no, I couldn't see one either. I just was checking because I thought you had.
I saw a hand, but then it was lowered. Yeah. Okay, that's the.
Fully recognize that there's a lot of content that we presented, and again, if people want to reflect and bring comments back later, again, if you contact us via Benson or indeed any of the speakers today, we'd be absolutely delighted to have your thoughts. There is a lot of content there, and fully understand if people want to take it away and reflect on it a little bit more and give a more considered opinion.
Okay, I see a hand. Let me see who is it. I can't see who has raised his hand or her hand. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Najwa, yes.
Oh.
Najwa. Go ahead.
Yes.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for this very interesting session. It did help us to understand the future orientations of the work on Beyond GDP. I would like to talk from the perspective of a National Statistical Office of a data producer. All what have been presented definitely has its community of users who are interested in getting more information, not only GDP, because it has its own limitations in terms of information it can provide. There is a need to have more information on well-being, more information on environment. We all agree that decision makers need to have more indicators produced in a timely manner and in high quality. But we need also to keep in perspective the resources available to national statistical offices and to their capacity to develop, I wouldn't say new indicators, new work plans to accommodate for the existing frameworks, as Richard has mentioned. There are lots of already frameworks available that we are struggling to be able to start producing some of the additional indicators in addition to GDP and in addition to the SDG indicators that we have a very long list of indicators that we are asked to produce. I believe we need to keep in mind that not all countries have the same resources. We are struggling to follow the requirements of the users community. It will help us a lot to have a line of priorities in which we need to focus. We cannot work on all what have been presented at the same time because we have limited resources. We need to allow us to accommodate our work plans in order to be able to start producing these additional indicators that are required. The frameworks has been there for a long time, but we haven't been able to work on these up till now. I mean, I just wanted to raise the voice of the NSOs and to show that not everyone has the same resources, not the same research teams, not the same resources to develop new surveys and to produce indicators that are more and more required. It will help us just to have a work plan in terms of priorities that we need to work on, in addition to existing priorities for SDGs and for economics. I would stop here, thank you, but I just wanted to raise the challenges we are facing.
And I couldn't agree more. You don't need to be a big or a small or a northern or a southern NSI to find yourself in much the same conditions. As users always demand more than we can provide. I think that's very much why I think we're stressing this. This isn't about the production of lots more frameworks and models and dashboards and these sorts of things. It is about looking at what's out there, looking at who is using what is being the most impactful, helping to navigate users to what is the most useful for the types of policy questions that they're facing. And I think within that point about prioritization, you know, as we review this landscape and understand it better, I hope we will get to a position where countries will be able to see which outputs are more used, are more popular, and that might help to steer directions of travel in terms of thinking about what to work on next. If you've got a limited budget, it is always about prioritization and finding out what's happening out there in terms of relative use, relative usefulness. I think is going to be helpful. I hope it's going to be helpful. That's very much my aim. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Richard, for the reply. Okay, maybe let us ask one more time whether anybody has any more questions or comments, because we are running slightly over schedule. Yes, Wafa, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I want to thank Ms. Najwa Yaqub, given her long experience in national accounts in several countries. And I want to add to what she said, national statistical offices should respond to policy demand. And we don't see that, the demand for, from the policy side to measure sustainability and well-being, other than monitoring and reporting on SDGs, is not very, very strong. And this is where, priority and raising awareness and looking at the decision makers, that this is an important issue to look at, so that national statistical offices can respond to the demand and have the resources needed, to be able to develop this further. So this is just to add the policy side of it.
I agree. Part of this, in terms of making it clearer what is out there, what is possible, is also about making the case for investment to allow NSIs and bodies to produce this data for a wider variety of countries. Budgeting decisions are always very difficult, but we have to evidence how the data we can produce could be used, could be useful, and what the merit of having it would be. We may not always succeed. We have to be realistic there, but we have to be making the best case that we can. I hope this would assist.
Yes, thank you, Richard and Wafa, for the comments. Since there are no more questions or comments from anybody, again, we'd like to thank Richard for this comprehensive overview of the proposal to develop, measures to track sustainability, well-being, and inclusion, and so on. And thank you to everyone for asking these for questions and comments. And as Richard said, if you have any comments or questions on the presentations, all the three presentations after the meeting, please feel free to send me an email. My email is simb@un.org. And also, if you'd like to take part in any of the upcoming sprints, again, please drop me an email. And then with these comments, we'll end session 3. And I think we can move to session 4, right? Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much, Vincent, and thank you for our distinguished presenters. We would like from ESCO and ECA perspective to seek for the final. We have like 10 minutes left, and we want to see gauge more from your side, from the participants, whether you are from statistical offices, from government, from research. I want to see with Greg, if Greg, you are here with us, still with us. Yes, so yes. Greg, yeah, we are together representing this session. So we want to see more like comments, like we said, the polling questions were not enough to get your views and concerns. We want to raise the issues on what is more important. Would you be able to work on these issues? What do you expect the organizations and the network to help you with? So we have, like I said, you can just say what you think about, and we have also the last polling questions.
You like me to intervene?
Yes, you can also, address.
Yeah, okay. I think last time we had this USNA seminar on USNA. Vincent was a coordinator, coordinated with the Global Working Group. I think the network of economic statisticians also provide a very good opportunity, because a lot of capacity building and training are needed in our region. So we hope that this kind of a joint seminar would continue, because with Vincent as a coordinator, we are going to think about what will be the follow-up topics. So hopefully we can continue this kind of dialogue and training. This can be one of the areas, because nowadays, especially for this in webinar type, people get used to and very effective. Okay, over to you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Greg. We have more comments just from Najwa. I will double check what was there. Yes, Najwa mentions that we need international organizations to work according to national priorities. I agree there is need for more capacity building activities to NSO. I think, Najwa, yes, it was mentioned also by Mustafa Khawaja, our colleague, that national priorities come first. It's up to the country to decide on their priorities, their indicators, their dashboards. And the strength of this, the frameworks is to have in common a core system that allows this comparability and international standards. But it has to start from the countries themselves. And this is what I mentioned also, that you need it from the demand side, from the policy side, so that statistical offices can respond to the requests. I have to mention that we just conducted our statistical committee, UNESCO statistical committee, just last week. And we had a lot of the same issues coming up on the resources, the high demands on the statistical offices, and to prioritize areas. But then at the same time, to use technologies to expedite, to improve, to integrate, and use existing, like we said, existing data, improving administrative records, and collaborating and sharing experience. This is in line of what we are discussing here. And to take it forward, we have to say that from ESCWA side, we have the technical advisory group on economic statistics that who meet like every week or every year and come up with priorities and work plan for the countries. But again, we don't have social statisticians in this group. You have another technical advisory group on social statistics. And maybe it's a good idea to have something in common, to have these two expert groups meet in one meeting and exchange common issues and ideas related to beyond GDP and other areas that were mentioned in here. And what Oliver mentioned, also with our counterparts in Africa. You mentioned socializing, but it's also like knowledge sharing and lessons learned that we can bring together. So I see that other comments are data and availability still remains a major constraint. I answer to Salma again that there's a lot of data available and that's not used. So inventories, improving data sharing, improving data for statistical purposes is a major exercise that countries have to do at the national level. And then, like I said, using technology and engaging with the private sector, it's an exercise that is needed and that organizations can help with. We can put the questions for polling before we end and conclude the meeting. And if you think of other questions, we have few thanking notes on the presentations and the discussion. We thank you very much for your for the attendance and being with us. If you can provide us with your answers on the last questions, and like I said in the chat, what areas you want, what priorities, and if you have a specific experience from what has been presented in your country, if you want to share your own experience on this. So we give 5 minutes to answer the questions. We'll end the poll in 1 minute.
While we're waiting, can I jump in?
Yes, please.
Real quick.
It says no more consultation, so we have to be careful what we organize.
I just wanted to thank folks for their comments. There's certainly a lot of takeaways for me that I think we can bring back to the network. The first one is the importance of the work and sort of the common objectives. I think everybody sort of realizes that this work is very, very important. That said, I think, speaking on behalf of the NSOs, we do have to consistently think about priorities, data availability and resources and so on. And sort of in my view, one of the approaches, which is why I think the network is on the way to being a really successive initiative, is that we're going to leverage teamwork and partnerships and work that's already taking place. I think that's key. So we'll look at all of the feedback that we received today and certainly try to integrate it into the forward-looking work of the network. So I just want to thank everybody for their comments today.
Thank you, Andre. Yes, we end the poll and we show the results. You can okay, so I will just briefly show what's in the result. And this is what we have. Yeah. So it's obvious that, I mean, people or participants tell us like, it's enough consultation, let's do some real assistance. And the technical assistance, we have 31%, capacity building 54%, and least is more consultation, and then more networking 12%. So it's very obvious that we really need to go into action on how to help the countries. And, we as organizations and not donors, but I have to say that UK and Canada are, they have a lot of cooperation with the region and Arab countries and African countries. And we need to really enhance this cooperation and international development in statistics. The second question, which of the following can be relevant to your country organization? South-South cooperation in this area. So if you remember, we said like with Africa, we have a lot of in common, and then we can work with Asia Pacifics and Africa through a South-South cooperation. And Latin America. So very important is the knowledge sharing, 23%. The most important is technical assistance and capacity building. So this comes again. To a lesser rate, we have funding specific projects and national and regional networking. So do we still have, or that's it for this call from our participants, and it's a call also for organizers and donors to really try to see how we can really step in and provide the support needed. So it's all from my side. I just want to see if Tim is still with us. He mentioned that the project on NTA, if countries would like to join, if this is possible, please reach out, Tim, and tell countries if they want to join, how they join, what the capacity and what support they can get. This is something that can be practical just before we end the meeting.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that. I just popped my email address into the chat, which is tim.miller@un.org. And so you can just contact me directly. We provide technical support, capacity building efforts to member states at their request in two key areas. So I'm talking about the population division. Wait a minute, there we are up here at the right-hand corner, the population division. The two areas we provide support in are population projections. So when countries are ready after completing a census, when they're ready to do population projections, we provide support in that area, which is training support on how to undertake those projections. And then we also, and that's the other area I was talking about today, provide support in the estimation of national transfer accounts. So how national accounts are distributed among population groups. So we provide those two forms of capacity building, and you can just shoot me an email, which I've listed there.
Yeah, maybe we can do something joint together. And these are very important areas that countries request from ASCO to support.
Sure, that would be great.
Okay, thank you, Tim. So I think but for now, we can just say thank you for everybody. We thank the panelists and our colleagues in ECA and UNSD. And from my side, I just want to say we wish all the well-being and happiness, measured or not, to everyone. So بالعربي بلكن شكرا لمشاركتكم ولتعاونكم وبنتمنى الرفاه والاستدامة للجميع. If there's anything else from UNSD or the network, please, before we close.
No, nothing else to add.
Okay, so we take the comments and the polling questions. You still can communicate with us on the way forward. And thank you very much for joining us. Thank you from all our team here in ASCO. Okay, bye.